Hi, Secreters! So, welcome back. I wanted to touch base with you and talk a little bit about my comment today for Yom Kippur. So, it really kind of touched off in me a sense to talk about some things with the history of the religion that is Jewish. One of the things, whenever I was showing you the books I was going through the other day, the Washington Irving 3-volume set, and the Thomas Keightley book, which Thomas Keightley was the author of a book that basically pulled all different kinds of mythology and folklore from different parts of the world together in a book that Catherine Briggs used. Catherine Briggs is mentioned in The Secret Book. And so we need to really kind of talk about that, because those are hints that Byron lays out, lets us know where to look for fairy creatures, their origins, and all of that. So as I was looking over this great little work, it dawned on me that, gosh, you know, the African tree fairies could very easily tie into North Africa, the Jewish heritage that, you know, essentially the beginning of man, right? If we're in the realm of, you know, Islam or Christianity, or even being, you know, Jewish for Hebrew beliefs, you know, life started there, started by the Nile, right? And so we have kind of a tie with not only the Jewish element of Africa and the tree fairies. You know, the tree fairies themselves come from the tree of life. The tree of life was based where? Garden of Eden, right? That's in Old Testament. So it's very interesting to see the link between not only the African tree fairy and Hebrew beginnings, but also the Persian Dijinn, right? So you break off from that Abrahamic, in that kind of, in that break. So when we talk about fairy secrets come in twos, we could see that the Persian element and the African element could be tied closely together. And let's think about why. So 1979, we get in our, like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and you get in your telephone booth and you teleport back, and you open the doors and you get out and you get to see everything that's going on in 1980. Well, in 79, we had this mass migration of Iranian people, Persians, after the Persian monarchy fell, and thousands of them came to America as refugees and immigrants looking to get away from the chaos of that country. Byron would have witnessed that. He would have seen that this was going on. And clearly he mentioned bits and pieces of it in The Secret Book. And so it lends you to feel what it was like in that time, right? So we had the gas crunch in 79. We had these Persians coming over. Remember their amazing carpet weaving skills. And where did all those 40,000 of those immigrants from Persia came? To Los Angeles. So I was thinking about Justin Chamberlain the other day, because he had said, it was on his thread, and I think we were talking about the West Coast, and we were mentioning how that person and Eric were talking about, well, maybe that guy in West Coast looks like Hugh Hefner. That kind of, I mean, he does look like a genie coming out of a bottle, kind of similar to both, you know, both of these gentlemen's theories and thinking, and maybe who that apparition was. But really kind of thinking, whoa, this kind of takes me back a little bit, because if this is any relation to Persian, this is an LA reference. Is there a cast there? Don't know. But I can tell you that they, you know, these Persian immigrants made a name for themselves and a community for themselves on the West Side. So, or in a place called the West Side, I should say. And I think it's in Westmore or something. But anyway, lots of West connotation there. So, and it's definitely something to at least consider when we're looking. I know people are, oh, Karen, you're just crazy. You're a crazy Karen. You know, we've talked about this. It's the Persian is in Houston because of the oil. Very well, maybe. I have a strong argument for Houston myself. But I also want to think about what that time felt like. What it was like in 1979 when I would turn on the television to like the whatever 4 channels we only had. And actually, we probably had a few more actually then. A few more, but 1980, then we got MTV and the whole world changed, right? So video killed the radio star. Got to remember that one. That's also in The Secret. So, you know, if we don't think about some of these areas that received these large influxes of immigrants for the time, I think we're missing out truly on some amazing clues in history. And so when we talk about the even with the African tree fairy, I mean, there's nothing really stated about an African tree fairy in all of this mythological reading. The only real fairy that comes out of Africa, what I've seen mentioned multiple times, is the Yumbos. And the Yumbos were subterraneous little 2-foot creatures, white-haired, white-skinned, and they say originally the term came from noticing the newcomers coming up off the water, and they were the Dutch, the French, the British, you know, coming to essentially take a lot of these Africans away from their country. So it has a very interesting meaning to what a Yumbo truly is. However, no mention of them being a tree fairy. So then that leads me to believe more and more we are talking about the tree of life. And there very well could be a heavily Hebrew element to the North African, to the painting, to the African painting. One of the things that sticks out to me about that painting specifically is the fruit that's on the vine. A lot of people tend to think it's a pear. For a while, I kind of thought it was an English. I thought it was a pear, and I thought it was referencing a flowering pear, potentially a place where a tree would be for digging for the cast. But as I've started delving more and more into this history, I have found it's actually not a pear; it's a fig, and that makes all the sense in the world. Because figs were prized possessions in North Africa in the beginning of man. And it was a way they ate. The feasts would, you know, signify they would have pears. Ancient Egyptians would be buried with golden figs. And sorry if I said pears. Figs. So they would be buried with these things, and they shared, you know, communally with these types of fruits. And the fig tree itself has a very interesting history. And then you go, well, but who's the lady in the painting? Well, I have thoughts about that too. I know a lot of people try to kind of put a modern day spin on what they think that person is, or who that person is, but I don't think there is a modern person that's represented there. And if anything, it's historical, just like the witches were, you know, for the Boston painting. I mean, we're talking about, it's more like the idea, right? JJP paints this witch because, you know, then you're supposed to automatically think, oh, Salem witch trials. He didn't actually seek out some specific witch to paint. So with the African painting, you have this woman over here, which looks a lot like Cleopatra with a African twist, to me that makes more sense. Because we're talking about, in this painting, the savagery and the evolution of North Africa. And in some respects, a big part of that comes from Christianity, comes with, being Jewish and the Hebrew writings and the Talmud and the Torah and Islam and the Quran. And I mean, the African painting has so much deep meaning in it for history that it almost has kind of a double meaning, right? We've got all that going on, but then we have the slavery element and the Civil War that Byron talks about too. And one of those things that's important to remember as well is the duality of meaning for paintings and poems, for places and history, for nature and the current time. Or what would have been 1980, right? And I'd be remiss if I didn't at least point that out, because I think even the deepest history can kind of tend to get overlooked by a lot more of the obvious and the obvious importance of the obvious. Okay? The slavery, Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln's assassination, General, Lee basically surrendering, all of these things play a crucial part in our history. But we also have to know where it all really came from. So in that note, you have the Persian Dijinn, which is also considered like a demon, an evil spirit. It's even referred to in Hebrew as an evil demon spirit. So we've got the African element, North Egypt, and the Persian element, right? So they're all really kind of closely intertwined, and it'd be really important to try to decipher each's own meanings in these poems. So I wanted to share that thought today and see where it takes you to, because I know that, could there be a cask in Charleston? Yes. Do I think there's probably one there? Possibly. Do I think it's the right painting? I question that. Because, in 1979, 1980, we had, he talks about it in the book, the police brotherhood, the mistreatment of black people, which, sadly, by police, still clearly kind of happening in some areas. Can't deny it. Can't deny it. But he, when he's talking about that, he's pointing out these areas that have had, this trauma in their community. And when we think about Africans on a whole, African Americans, they had 3 different migrations. Excuse me, I gotta take a drink. So, good tea. The British would be proud. Anyway, so they had all these migrations after the Emancipation, and 3 different times they moved to many cities. If you look back at the census of 1980, the majority of African Americans, if we're basing it off of where groups of them still were and descendants of original African slaves, they were in New York, they were in Philadelphia, they were in Detroit, and they were in Maryland. Heavily, 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 heavily concentrated areas. And nobody is even looking at them. Which is a disservice to the book and to Byron for what he's trying to teach us, right? So, if that element plays a part, we have to look at all possible places. And this is why, even like yesterday's video when we were talking about, poem 2, gnomes admire phase delight. A gnome is a lowland German mythological creature. Folklore. Okay? Not French. So, either we're not really processing the words that Byron wrote down, and we're just kind of going off of what other people are thinking, or, oh, it's been this way for 40 years. I'm going to jump in the hunt. Okay, everybody thinks it's this city or that city, so I'm going to start researching that city. Instead of actually doing the work yourself and reading the words and understanding their meanings and their context, because this is 1980, right? He's got to throw you a bone some way or another and kind of be tricky and clever and see if you catch things, in the writing. I mean, the fact that Byron communicated with people before he passed and made comments, for instance, give a shout out to Denise for St. Louis, because he says there is a cask in St. Louis, and he puts a D on the end, and everybody says, that was just a misspelling, and yeah, I don't think he was really being, truthful if there's a cask there or not. There might be. But I'll tell you, Byron was a communications major. Why would he do that? Why would he just, happenstancely type, leave it? Oh, shoot, I just put it. No. Come on. This guy is a writer. He's a creator. It would be sacrilegious to be talking with people and not, and I do it all the time because I misspell sorts of things and I have to go and refix stuff 100,000 times. But this guy did it for a living. So to be that cavalier, to presume, oh, it's just misspelled. It was just the D's right there by the S on the keyboard. Well, it is, but in Byron's speak, it means something. So that's what he wants us to pay attention to. Pay attention to the words. Look up definitions of the words. Look up definitions of these words in current dictionaries from 1980, and a lot of them you can still access online. The JSTOR.com, JSTOR.com, is a free resource, coincidentally inspired by the Jewish community, which is very cool. And but it's a free resource, and you can look things up there. And, be willing and flexible to change your ideology and understand this difference. Even if you spent hours on a theory, if you spent months on a theory, and now you're trying to be open-minded and kind of give everything a new look, and you find that a lot of your theory doesn't match anymore, that's still important knowledge, because some of that can still come into play in some of these cities in some way. So don't beat yourself up over it, but be willing to look at things in new lights all the time, gaining knowledge, just sucking it in and applying it in different ways, because there's a lot of these poems that I think have been misinterpreted and misplaced. And I think in this group we might be able to actually put proper definitions with proper words that lead us down a proper path for where a cask could be. So I just ask that you stay positive, stay thinking on it, and question things. When you question things, you're either going to find out whether you're going to make a really strong argument for your own case, or you might be wrong. But either way, the wisdom that you've gained is immeasurable, right? I know several of you, if you were to go to certain cities and talk to the locals, they wouldn't have a clue about some of the history that you already know. I mean, it's great. And Byron's prophecy in that way comes true for him and comes true for all of us. So, you know, and that's why I say, like, I have to support people in their theories. My theories change every day. Okay. Just today I was talking to Rebecca and I'm like, you know what? I'm thinking some things make sense for another place in Canada. But being able to have that free knowledge and share things and talk about the history that you know and history that someone else can share with you from that country is like nothing on this earth. It's so cool. And we have Byron to thank for that. And I know if Byron was here today, he would obviously be observing his Jewish holiday. And so this is the little shout out to him, going, you know, nostalgically back into North Africa and the very beginnings of the Hebrew religion, the Christian religion, the religion of Islam. All of that started there. So I hope you guys have a super Thursday coming up on the weekend. I've got some more studying to do. I'm gonna talk about poem 3 in the next video. I realized Byron did not give a hint for that poem. And, well, quite frankly, I think he was expecting us to know why. He was expecting us to get the city right based on the verse. So, you know, Boston was not Philly. So there we go. But it'll be fun to kind of talk about it. So I'll briefly go over that, and it might be a combination of poem 3 and poem 4. So, and then I know I'm getting some people talking about, well, what about this fair folk or that fair folk? So who knows? I may come back with poem 3 and 4 tomorrow, or, you know, it may actually be, we're going to dissect a fair folk that day, a fair person, and understand, you know, why weren't the Spanish notated in the back of the book anywhere? Why do we have to go through the fair people to find the Spanish reference? You know, well, hello, Kamira, I'm talking to you. There are hints in that. There's an understanding that we are supposed to figure out. Part of it is the conquistadors were pretty awful people. A lot of murdering, a lot of killing, a lot of raping and pillaging. But, you know, we wouldn't know that unless we do the history on it, which is what Byron wanted us to do. So, anyway, I will talk to you next time. You guys ferry on, and I'll see you soon. Bye.